What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. I'm your host, Mason Kennahan, and we're back here for winter break now, out of the dorm and back home. So I can't wait. I'm excited to be here. We've got a great matchup coming up this upcoming weekend against the Philadelphia Eagles. It's going to be a good one. Plus, we've got more content coming up over break. We've got the Commanders playoff race as well, and playoff stretch once they get into the playoffs, most likely at this point. But yeah, I'm excited to be back home. I'm ready to go, ready to get these podcast episodes out and working again. But we'll get into it at the end of this episode. This will be the last one for probably about 2 weeks. But before we go to that, let's talk about this game, because this game is huge for the Washington Commanders this upcoming Sunday. The Commanders will play against the Philadelphia Eagles at home at Northwest Stadium. I believe it's at 1:00. There's going to be a division title on the line in this one. There's going to be playoff percentages, pretty big playoff probability percentages, and a potential playoff berth for the Washington Commanders on the line this upcoming weekend. The Commanders are looking for revenge against this Philadelphia team that beat them back in Week 11, 26-18 on Thursday Night Football in Philadelphia. It was a game where Washington really controlled it for the first half. They were leading at the half 7-3. At one point, they were leading, I believe, 10-3. But it was the fourth quarter that really, it was a gut punch for them. 20 points for Philly in that fourth quarter. We'll see what's going to be able to happen in this one, but it was pretty bad for Washington in that fourth quarter back in Week 11. Now this team has gotten better. This team looks definitely, I would say, a little bit different than it did 5 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago when Washington last played them. You've got the addition of Marshawn Lattimore. There was kind of people questioning, was Lattimore going to play in that game against the Eagles? Ultimately, he was never even close to play against the Eagles, as he didn't even play until Week 15 last week against New Orleans. But, I mean, look, Marshawn Lattimore is going to be coming back to the secondary to help the secondary. Mikey Sanders still has improved so much since that time in Week 11. He's going to be put in a better position against Devontae Smith, most likely. You're going to have guys like Jeremy Chin, who's improved and is ultimately might actually play in this game. I'll have to look at the injury report, but he might actually play in this game. And then some other stuff as well. But I guess we'll take a look at the injury report here as I'm pulling it up against the Philadelphia Eagles. We're looking at the Wednesday. The Thursday has not come out yet as I'm recording this. But Zach Ertz, I would not expect him to play. He did not practice on Wednesday. He's in concussion protocol. Jeremy Chin was in concussion protocol, but he also was limited on Wednesday. So there's a chance Chin will play against the Eagles, which would be massive for this team. A lot of other veterans were limited on Wednesday. Dante Fowler, Daron Payne, Terry McLaurin, Luke McCaffrey, Frankie Louvu, Cleveland Farrell, Michael Dieter. I mean, as well, all those guys were limited, except Fowler. Actually, Fowler was a full participant. But pretty much for most of those guys, it was kind of just rest, non-injury rest for those guys. And then some of them actually had some injuries, but I would expect all those guys to be able to play on Sunday. Zane Gonzalez and kicker Greg Joseph both had a kid on the same day, so both of them didn't practice on Wednesday. But I would expect whoever would be Gonzalez or Joseph to be ready to go to kick on Sunday. Other news: Jonathan Allen, his practice windows opened up. He was a limited participant on Wednesday. It'd be pretty big if Jonathan Allen were to play on Sunday against the Philadelphia Eagles, but coming off an injury that many people thought originally was going to be a season-ending injury, ultimately did not end up being a season-ending injury. But Jonathan Allen is kind of up in the air for Sunday. I would not expect him to go, but we shall see what happens there. I mentioned some of the other guys already, but yeah, it's the team is relatively healthy compared to what they were against the Philadelphia Eagles. Coming off of a short week, no Marshawn Lattimore. You had some other guys missing as well, especially I believe on the offensive line there were some guys missing. So, pretty big stuff for Washington. The secondary, the defense looks a lot different. It's going to be a good matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles for sure. I'm excited for it. It's going to be a good one. So, like I mentioned, the Commanders lost by 8 points after being up 7-3 at halftime against the Philadelphia Eagles. What needs to change for them to win this game this upcoming Sunday against the Eagles, where a win, a Falcons loss, and either a Seahawks or Rams loss, one or the other, and the Washington Commanders are in the playoffs, which is awesome. It's awesome. First playoff berth since 2020. A chance this weekend to clinch it. If not this weekend, they really just need at some point in this at some point to win one game. Plus, they need the Falcons to lose one, and the Rams or Seahawks to lose one at some point in this regular season. So there's a lot of possible scenarios for Washington to clinch. It's going to be pretty easy, and Washington, I believe, has an 80% chance or somewhere around there to make it to the playoffs, which they are kind of in controlling their own destiny right now. If you win 2 of the final 3, you're in the playoffs, and if you only win 1 of the final 3, you're going to need some help. But still, there's a pretty good chance for Washington to make the playoffs. So with that being said, how can this team make the playoffs this week, and how can they overcome their loss to Philadelphia a couple weeks or a month ago, really, and beat Philadelphia? Well, let's take a look at some of the stats for how the Commanders' offense matches up against the Eagles' defense. The Commanders' offense, top 10 in pretty much every efficiency, third in EPA per play, sixth in success rate. The Eagles' defense, they're up there as well, third in EPA per play and third in success rate. The Commanders are succeeding on 48.4% of their plays, which is sixth in the league. The Eagles are only allowing success on 39.8% of the plays. Again, this is measured off, like, for example, 1st and 10, picking up 3 yards, right? Staying on pace with the chains and making sure you don't get behind. You don't get stuck in a 3rd and 9 or a 3rd and 10, or potentially even like a 2nd and 9 as well. That hurts your EPA. So basically, EPA is measured off of, can you stay in pace with the chains and pick up first downs when you should. So success rate is massive, something that a lot of teams look at and stuff. So I definitely want to keep on looking at that. But yeah, Washington's offense, one of the top units in the league. The Eagles defense right now is on an absolute tear, led by their secondary guys, some young guys like Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, who Washington, you could say, gave the Eagles Cooper DeJean because they traded back with the Eagles to get that pick. But also in return, they got Mike Sanders-Stowe, Ben Sinnott. So you can make a case there one way or the other. But yeah, you got Quinion Mitchell, one of the best rookie corners in the league. You got Cooper DeJean, who's had a pretty solid year as a rookie as well. Definitely come on as of late. But this Washington team, they're going to have to be more two-dimensional. In order to succeed in this game, we look back. I'm going to be looking back at this game a lot to see what Washington did wrong and ended up losing the game against Philadelphia 5 weeks ago. But Washington was really one-dimensional in terms of they could only succeed one way on offense, and that was through the air. Jane Daniels was 22 of 32 for 191 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. But the run game did not help him. And saying that the run game is such an integral part of Cliff Kingsbury's offense and what he brings as a play caller, he needs the run game to succeed. And the Commanders' run game has succeeded. It's one of the best units in the league, ranking 3rd in rushing EPA and 1st in rushing success rate this season. But they just could not run the ball against Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. And that is hard to do. You're going up against one of the best defensive tackle duos in the entire league. That is hard to do. But this offensive line, we're going to get Tyler Biadasz back. He was sick for the game last week against New Orleans, and you saw how much of an impact that really was down the stretch of the game where Washington could not run the ball at all in that game against New Orleans. But not as much as I thought they would. They still ran for 130 yards, but not as much as I thought. And in this game against Philadelphia, 28 carries for 93 yards and a touchdown, averaging just 3.3 yards per carry. This Washington team overall, I mean, let me bring it up. This Washington team overall, I'm pretty sure they average 4.9 yards per carry overall, and they only averaged 3.3 against the Philadelphia Eagles 5 weeks ago. So running the ball is going to be key. Can they can the offensive line get movement and push guys forward, or push defensive linemen back actually, and move forward with the offensive line. Brian Robinson at 16 for 63 and a touchdown. So, I mean, he was kind of running down, running, but like still, it was not as enough success. Plus, once the team got down and they lost the momentum in the fourth quarter, it was really over at that point. So, that's going to be key for the Washington Commanders, because if you can get a solid run game going, you can work that play action pass, fool some of these younger linebackers that Philadelphia has, guys like Nolan Smith and Nakobe Dean. So it's going to be key to see how the run game is going to work out for Washington, and if they're going to be able to have more success this time around than they did against Philadelphia last time. So that is crucial. In terms of the pass game, just Jane has to keep on doing his thing. Recently, let me bring it up, but I know he threw that pick. Not really worried about that against the Eagles, but in the last 4 games, Jane Daniels has thrown 4 interceptions. That is not great. I know 1 or 2 maybe were not entirely on him, but in the last 4 games, he has had 4 interceptions. Now, on the other hand, he's also thrown, was it 3, 6, 8 touchdowns on the other hand. So you want to look at it that way too. But I think for him, it's just being, hey, use your feet when you can. Pick up as many yards as you can. You can scramble out. Now, these linebackers are very good in terms of spying on mobile quarterbacks. Guys like Zach Bond, great tackler, and Zach Bond, the Eagles' starting middle linebacker. Bond is going to be an All-Pro this season, most likely, and that's someone that Jane will have to worry about. But if you look back at the last game, you put up 18 points. The offense was really stagnant for the first half. But I mean, if you look at it, it was a 4th and 2 at the +30, and the team kind of had a botched play to lose the game when you're down by 8 and you're driving. So the team had the opportunity to go down and tie the game, but they just weren't able to, and weren't able to execute well down the stretch. And for this offense, executing well has been fairly good this season in most scenarios. We'll get to the defense in a little bit, but offensively, I'm pretty confident in this team against this Eagles defense. And as long as the offensive line can hold up against that Eagles pass rush and just give Jane just enough time, you don't have to give him all day. Like, you don't have to give him the amount of time that Sam Howell needs to get rid of the ball, but just not having him pressured immediately would be huge, because we saw down the stretch, once he was getting pressured a lot, and there was a lack of communication on the offensive line and pass pro in that game against New Orleans. Now, you get Tyler Biage back, like I said, and that'll help a lot, but just making sure the offensive line communicates well, make sure they know when Jaden is rolling out, which is really hard to do, because as offensive lineman, you're kind of focused on your guy and you don't really know where the quarterback is all the time, because that forced a couple of holding penalties in that game against New Orleans, and against the Titans as well. So we'll have to see, but overall, I'm confident in this offense, and say you won back-to-back games. They have the momentum going into this home game against the Philadelphia Eagles, and I expect them to do well. So let's flip sides of the ball to the defensive side. My biggest question for them is, can they put 4 quarters of football together? That has been something that they did not do last week against the New Orleans Saints. Now, they did it pretty well against Tennessee, but they did not do well against Dallas, and they did not do it well against Philadelphia. Let me bring up the Steelers game. But, yeah, Steelers games, whatever. But the Eagles, the Cowboys, and the Saints, they let up, I believe, 20 points in all 3 of those games, in that, or not 20 points. They let up a good amount of points. I think at least 2 touchdowns in all of them. Yeah, 12 points for the Saints in that fourth quarter. So I posted it on my Twitter at Mason_Kenahan, if you want to follow me there, or on Blue Sky. It's at the same thing. But I posted it. It's the Commanders have let up 40 plus points in the fourth quarter, and they have only allowed 9 points in the 3 quarters, like first 3, and they've allowed 40 in the fourth. Or sorry, it was 9 points in the first half and 40 points in the second half over the last 3 games. So it just shows how um, this team gets, I guess, tired, or there seems to be lack of execution on in the back half of games, and that's what killed them in the Philadelphia game. That's what killed them in the Dallas game, and almost again in the Saints game. So I think it's just putting 4 quarters together if you're the Washington Commanders defense, and it should be a lot easier now with Marshawn Lattimore out there locking down, or hopefully locking down, AJ Brown or Devontae Smith. It'll be interesting to see what Dan Quinn and Joe Witt do. Do they make Marshawn Lattimore travel with AJ Brown the entire game, which is I think that's what I would do, but or do they do that, or do they just keep him on that, I guess you could say, right side? If you're like on the defensive side of the ball and you're looking at the offense, Lattimore was on the right side the entire game. Um, do they just keep him on the right side like they did against the Saints, or do they move him around and make him travel with AJ Brown? That'll be a fun one to watch, and definitely a major help on the back end, because this team got like destroyed by AJ Brown in that passing offense. Jalen Hurts threw for 221 yards, 65 for Brown, 61 for Goddard, 52 for Saquon. Like the passing offense was going for Jalen Hurts, especially towards the end of the game. But I think where this team has really struggled in recent weeks and could struggle again against this Philadelphia team is on the ground, because look, I think everyone kind of knew it. Once Nick Sirianni started giving Saquon Barkley the ball, the Eagles were going to win that game against the Washington Commanders. The Eagles were trying to pass it in the first half, and they kind of struggled doing so. But once they got Barkley involved with the offense, especially on the ground, Barkley finished 26 carries for 146 yards, 2 touchdowns. He averaged 5.6 yards per carry. Plus, he had the 50 through the air as well. I mean, the guy had an amazing game. And of course, you can make the case, the MVP finalist he should be, or MVP, like, should be in the MVP conversation for Barkley. But yeah, I mean, like, once they started giving Barkley the ball, it was over, because this Commanders defense is run defense is still one of the worst in the league. Things have improved for Washington, especially through the year with Marshawn Lattimore. Dropback EPA, they're now 20th in dropback success rate. They're now 16th. As again, this was like in the 30s before, and now rushing EPA, they're still pretty struggling there as well. 25th in rushing EPA and 23rd in rushing success rate as a unit. And you're going up against the top ranked unit in rushing EPA for the Philadelphia Eagles. That's going to be a struggle, and that's going to be a weakness for the Washington Commanders. Now, how will Joe Witt and Dan Quinn limit that? Will they put more defenders in the box? And you can now kind of do that, because you can leave Marshawn Lattimore one-on-one with AJ Brown or with Devontae Smith. You can play more man coverage on the back half. But if you're going to put more resources in the box, you're going to have to rely on your secondary pieces to make some big plays one-on-one against two very good wide receivers in Devontae Smith and in AJ Brown. So it'll be interesting to see how Dan Quinn and Joe Witt balance putting more guys in the box to stop Saquon Barkley versus giving more help to his cornerbacks in the back half, that's what you kind of had to do when you didn't have Marshawn Lattimore. And that's kind of what got exposed, was you had to give more help to your cornerbacks in the back half, because the cornerbacks were not playing that great. But now that you have one of the best cornerbacks in the league playing for your team, you can allow them to be one-on-one on the outside and be confident in that. And you can also put more defenders in the box that way to try and stop Saquon Barkley, which is still going to be hard, even with 6-7 guys in the box. So we'll see what happens there, but I'm looking forward to this game. All right, let's wrap it up. Final thoughts and score prediction. This is an interesting one, guys, because I've been on the fence. I started recording this episode. I have no clue what I was going to say for my score prediction, but it's going to be a good game. It's for sure. I think Washington will definitely be as competitive, if not even more competitive, in this one than they were against Philadelphia back in Week 11. But again, Washington was up in that first half. It's just going to be that second half. Can this defense continue to have success later on in the game and get some big time stops, which they haven't been able to do in recent weeks? That's been something that they've struggled with, and something that I think could definitely be a weakness on this team coming down the stretch and into the playoffs for Washington. But with that being said, I'm stalling here. But with that being said, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Eagles 30, Washington 27. Eagles 30, Washington 27. I think this Eagles team is playing like the best in the league right now. And I know this Washington team, a lot of people are picking them to upset Philadelphia. And maybe I'm going to reverse jinx this and Washington ends up winning because at the end of the day, I love Washington to win, right? But on my non-biased opinion, stepping back as a fan, I'm going to go Eagles 30, Commanders 27. I think ultimately this Eagles run game is going to be too much for Washington, even with potentially having more help in the box, which we'll have to wait and see what Joe Witt and company do there. But I'd go Eagles 30, Commanders 27. I think Washington scores a good amount of points. It's going to be very close down the end. But, man, the closer, Saquon Barkley, has been on an absolute tear this season. And, I mean, I think he does it again. It's going to be hard to stop him. It's going to be very hard to stop him. So, Eagles 30, Commanders 27 is my final score prediction. So, that'll wrap things up. And now, here's the thing, guys. All right, we've got holidays coming up here. I'm going on a trip. I'm pretty much going to be off the grid for like a week. So the next podcast that will be dropping will be the post game pod for the Commanders Falcons Sunday night football game, which is going to be, of course, in week 17. So I'm not getting back until that night, actually. So we're going to watch that game. I'm going to record a pod that night, and it'll be out in the morning. But that will be the next pod that will be going up. Hopefully, Washington is able to win this game against Philadelphia. And then I guess Michael Penix. Let me just throw in a Falcons prediction as well. Let me go Commanders 27 again. Or Commanders. I go Commanders 33, Falcons 23. Commanders 33, Falcons 23 in week 17. And that's when Washington clinches a playoff spot on Sunday Night Football in prime time. So that'll wrap things up for another episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. I'm excited to be back in the area, back in the DC area, ready to go for the Commanders playoff push. So that'll do it for today's episode and this week's episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. See you guys next one. Peace.